Hey, Darryl.
Hey, Buck.
Welcome, everyone. Uh, my guest today, is Darryl Stickel, Dr. Darryl Stickel. Ian Macnaughton, whom I interviewed a while back, recommended him strongly. My interview with Ian was about CEOs and somatic process. He recommended Darryl, who has done great work with organizations and wrote his doctoral dissertation at Duke University on building trust in hostile environments. And he has devoted the last 20 years of his career to help people understand what trust is, why it's important, how to build it. He's been nominated as one of the world's thought leaders on this topic of trust and has a rare blend of deep theoretical knowledge and practical applied experience. And I'll have links to his information in the description to this video. The overall topic is trust, building trust in leadership, in organizations, and also in family. Trust broadly construed. Thank you, Darryl, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, very much welcome. And pretty open-ended beginning. I'm interested in you have developed a model for trust building that you've implemented with organizations over many years. Uh, Tell us about the model. Tell us about how you apply it. Tell us juicy examples.
Sure.
Free flow as you wish, according to your pleasure. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'll try not to go on too long without having an opportunity for you to engage.
Okay.
Um, I don't want to go on a long monologue, but when I first started working in this area, I was working in native land claims in British Columbia, and they asked me these series of deep theoretical questions like what is self-government or what will the province look like 50 years after claims are settled? The last question they asked me was, how do we convince a group of people we've shafted for over 100 years they should trust us? And I thought, man, that's a good question. It gets to the heart of those sort of deep, long-standing conflicts that we can't seem to resolve. And so I went to Duke and started studying, and I came to realize that most of the trust research, most of the literature focused primarily on uncertainty. And for me, the definition for trust is the willingness to make yourself vulnerable when you can't completely predict how someone else is going to behave. And that means that there's elements of uncertainty and vulnerability embedded in that definition.
Could you,
And so,
sorry for interrupting, could you repeat that definition one more time and a little bit more slowly? Would you mind?
sure,
Yeah.
it's the willingness to make yourself vulnerable
Yeah.
when you can't completely predict how someone else is going to behave. Is that
Okay. Okay. That's a definition for trusting another or trying to build trust in them toward you or something else or
it's getting others to trust us,
okay, got it. Thank you. Thank
but
you.
it's how the trust decision gets made. And so if I was trying to get you to trust me, I would need to understand where uncertainty comes from for you, what the vulnerabilities you're experiencing are, and I could take steps to reduce your uncertainty or take steps to manage your vulnerability. But we'll get to that.
Sorry. I'm trying not to interrupt. It's just it was a definition. That's why I interrupted, just for my audience to have it in.
Yeah.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Yeah, and so when we're deciding whether to trust someone, we ask ourselves two fundamental questions. It's how likely am I to be harmed, which is perceived uncertainty, and if I'm harmed, how bad's it going to hurt, which is perceived vulnerability. And so for me, it's uncertainty times vulnerability gives us a level of perceived risk. And Bach, we each have a threshold of risk that we can tolerate. You know, for some it's low and their experiences have made them leery and they are what we would call somebody with low trust levels. For some it's high, right? They're comfortable trusting often. And so what that means is that in early relationships, uncertainty is usually pretty high. So if uncertainty is high, then the level of vulnerability has to be low for us to still fit beneath that risk threshold. And as our relationship gets deeper, the uncertainty goes down. The range of vulnerability we can tolerate in that relationship grows, and we can still fit beneath that threshold. And in our deepest relationships, we've got just a sliver of uncertainty with a huge range of vulnerability that we can tolerate from that other person and still fit beneath that risk threshold. And
You
so
mean,
for,
sorry,
go
sorry.
ahead, go
Uh,
ahead, Doc.
do you mean deep, healthy relationships? There's a sliver, but if it could be a deep, quite, harmful, unhealthy
Dis
relationship.
Dysfunctional
No,
relationship.
yeah. So
Yeah. Um,
I'm just wondering
I have a
when you say
different,
when you say deep, do you build in that it's healthy or yeah?
yeah, that's the assumption I'm making. You're
Okay,
right.
okay,
That it's a healthy relationship, that it's not one based on fear
yeah,
and dependence.
okay.
And so if we want to build trust, it's a case of understanding, where does uncertainty come from and how do I take steps to reduce it? Where does that vulnerability come from and how do I take steps to understand it for the other person and help them manage it? And so we can actually systematically understand where uncertainty comes from and where vulnerability comes from. And we can take steps to help people be more comfortable with us. So
Mhm.
uncertainty comes from us as individuals, and it comes from the context we're embedded in. And when I talk about trust, I talk about levers that we can pull to build trust. We all have the ability to build trust. Some are just better than others. And so those who aren't very good at building trust have a lever that they pull. And they pull it over and over again and just hope that it works. Those who are
Example.
better, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Could you give examples of that one lever? The people who are not very good at building trust, they have one lever that they pull over and over again. Could you give examples of their lever pulling?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the levers is ability, right? I have the competence to do what I say I'm going to do. And that tends to be our favorite lever. And so I could come on here and I could tell you and your listeners that I have a PhD in business from Duke and that I spoke at Harvard and that I've been nominated as one of the world's thought leaders. And for some, that might be enough. Um, but for others, their definition of ability might be different, right? It's, can I actually talk in a way that people get it, that people understand? Can I help them with the challenges that they're actually facing? Can I communicate it in a way that makes sense to people, right? And so I can pull that ability lever. And we do that when we apply for jobs and show our resume. And, you know, when we talk about the credentials we have and the experience that we have, those are all examples of pulling the ability lever.
Mm.
But there are three levers within us as individuals. There's benevolence. Do I have your best interests at heart? There's integrity. Do I follow through on my commitments and do my actions align with the values that I express? So do I walk the talk? And there's ability. And so if your concern is around benevolence and I pull the ability lever, I miss. And so what I do is I walk people through the different levers because those who are a bit better at building trust have multiple levers that they can pull. Those who are
May
really good,
oh,
go ahead, Buck.
thank you. So if the other person you've introduced three levers: benevolence, integrity, and ability. And ability,
Right.
we talked about a bit just before you introduced those three levers. You're saying, sorry, benevolence refers to, uh, sorry, okay, sorry, let me back up. You're trying to gain someone else's trust. The other
Right.
person may have a preferred, for the other person, a certain way. Sorry. Okay.
Can I
Vulnerability.
take a crack at this for you?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I'm saying that I'm trying to build trust by pulling the ability lever, and you may be concerned that I'm extremely capable, but not have your best interest at heart. Say, for example, you're engaged with a lawyer who's clearly really good at what they do, and you think this person may be smarter than me, they may be better informed than me, they've got a lot of ability, which means that they could really harm me if they don't have my best interest at heart,
Oh, right. Okay.
right?
A person needs to be convinced that you have their best interest at heart.
I'm saying that there can be gaps that show up in terms of our perception of benevolence. Like, does the person have my best interest at heart? There's a gap that could show up in terms of integrity. This person's incredibly skilled, but they just never follow through. Or they're really bright and capable, but they're flaky.
Mhm.
The gap could be in terms of ability. The gap could be in terms of the context, right? I don't really understand how the rules work, what good looks like, what how you're constrained. Um, and so all of those provide levels of uncertainty for us. And remember, this is all talking just about uncertainty and how we take steps to reduce that.
Yes.
And so people who aren't as adept at building trust have a lever that they pull. They may not pull it very well. Those who are better have multiple levers. Those who are really good have multiple levers and they know when to pull which one.
Those who are really good at building trust, at getting other people to trust them, have multiple levers and know when to pull which lever.
That's right.
Right. And and in this, are you also assuming or building in that the person who's trying to build trust using these levers, that they're coming at it honestly and sincerely and non-deceptively, or is it including being manipulative in using the levers?
You can be manipulative using the levers. And the caveat that I always provide is that that's not my intent. My intent is to help people close the gap between how much they are trusted and how much they should be trusted. Um,
Okay.
but but there are obviously people with ill intent. There are people who in the world who are already quite good at manipulating us and getting us to believe things that aren't true. Um,
Uh, thank you.
and
So
this
yeah.
is the way that they tend to do it. Um,
So so your work does can equip dishonest, manipulative people and enhance their skills, but your intent is to aim at those who are actually trustworthy, not just trying to convince others that they're trustworthy when they're not. Right? Am I getting
right.
it? Right? Right. Thank you. Okay.
You're
Okay.
absolutely right. And the caveat that I always put in place is if we deceive, then there's always a consequence. Um, you know, I don't want to be trusted more than I should because then I'm constantly trying to make up for the disappointment that I've created. I create a difficult environment for myself. It makes it more and more difficult for me to be trusted in the future.
Right.
Um, and the people that are manipulative and deceptive are already pretty good at what they do. Um, and so for me, there's an underlying assumption that trust levels are at the lowest we've ever seen, Bach. The, we haven't measured trust levels this low since we've started measuring. Um, and so,
I'll trust you on that. Just
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Actually, that was a half joke, but half like, well, I don't know your field, so I'm just going to trust you on that. But yeah, yeah. Okay.
there are multiple surveys being done every year, and every year they have the same response.
Okay.
These are the lowest trust levels we've ever seen. No, now these are the lowest trust levels we've ever seen. Um, they had a
Is
little variety a couple of years ago and said this is the furthest it's ever fallen. Um,
is there context? more specific context, like, is this like people trusting their government, families trusting other family members, employees trusting bosses? Is there like, I assume there's more specific, there's a further specification of what it means that trust levels are going down.
Yeah, it's trust in institutions like government or the church or
Hmm.
uh, agencies. It's trust in professionals, in business in general, in organizations. Um,
Hmm.
there's been an overall general decline of trust levels. Um, less
Okay.
less assessment of the family unit itself that I'm aware of, but you know, people have less trust for science, less trust for professionals, um, and there's a feeling that the social contract has been broken when it comes to business. Business says work hard and you'll be successful, and what we hear is work hard so I make more money.
Now let me when you say trust levels are going down, that would uh, the trust, okay, someone's trust could be justified or unjustified. Someone's lack of trust in someone or some business or some entity could be justified or unjustified.
Hmm.
When you talk about trust levels going down, you're not discriminating between whether the reduced trust is justified or unjustified. You're treating it as a package. Am I getting you?
Right.
Okay, okay. And also, and your primary work is on how to build trust, which could be used by dishonest people, but your intent is honest people. So I get why it wouldn't be so germane to distinguish between unjustified and unjustified trust, because you're talking about just skill building, which could be used morally or immorally, right? Right. So yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I wanted to ask another question, but did I interrupt something that you were on already?
We can get back to it. What's the other
Okay.
question you've got?
So it was going to be a deep dive, or well, I don't know about deep, but it was going to be a dive into the levers. So you say to people who are really good at building trust, know have a lot of levers to pull and know which lever to pull when. And I brought up the possibility of dishonest, manipulative people because the wording having levers and pulling levers may have a negative connotation to some people, but in this context, it's just a straightforward, accurate description of your work, and it's not, and it's primarily intended for honest, well-meaning people, right? Okay, and
Right.
I want right. I just want to clarify that for the audience that for the remainder of our chat, we'll talk about levers and pulling levers and having levers and learning levers, and we mean that in a neutral, accurate way. And you mean that in a neutral, accurate way. So do I. And your intent is to enable honest people, and I agree with that intent in you. So okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got uncertainty and the four levers that are within uncertainty.
One of
We've
the four,
got,
I had three.
so
Uh,
there's benevolence, integrity, ability, and the context.
context.
Context is the rules of the game, right? It's the formal and informal mechanisms of social control that constrain our behavior. It's how am I hemmed in by the world? So when I teach, I used to ask people if you could be anywhere doing anything with anyone right now, how many of you would be here sitting and listening to me speak? And I stopped doing that because it wasn't good for my self-esteem.
Mm,
Um, but the question becomes, then why are you here? And the answer is overwhelmingly the context, right? It's because of my job, or because I'm struggling with a problem, or I was told I had to be here. Um, I signed up for this course because I've got some other problems that I'm struggling with. Um, and so the context are the things, the formal elements are things like job description, performance package, right? Your assessments, um, rules and regulations, federal rules, provincial rules or state rules, company rules. Those are all the formal mechanisms of social control. And the informal ones are things like your norms, your values, your relationships. And the better we can understand these for somebody else, the more able we are to predict their behavior. So again, it's about reducing uncertainty. So the more I understand how you're constrained, the better I am at predicting how you're going to behave.
Thank you. May I step back to a bigger picture for a moment? I will report to you in the moment some vulnerability on my part, which is that you've introduced a lot of units in for me to deal with mentally, and I appreciate that, like, because I want to go like hardcore deep,
Right.
like deep, but it's a stress on my current intelligence and intellectual capacity. So uh, uncertainty is an you're talking about your trust building model. Uncertainty
Yeah.
is an important concept in that model. Under
Yes.
uncertainty, you have, thank you. Under uncertainty, you have four levers: benevolence, integrity, ability, context. You were just elucidating a bit on context. Can I go back to the higher level, the uncertainty? Are there other concepts in your model that are on the same level of and are siblings of uncertainty, or is that a bad question? Or I'm trying to get the
No, no, you're
okay.
bang on. And
Okay.
I really appreciate you
Okay.
articulating this in a way because there's people in the audience who are having the same experience you are right now.
Yeah.
Right. And I've been doing this for 30 years. So for me, it feels pretty simple.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
So, so it's uncertainty times vulnerability.
uncertainty.
Vulnerability has two levers. Right. And
Sorry.
so
Can I? Sorry. No, no. I'm very excited. But vulnerability, uncertainty times vulnerability is what though? What is that supposed to
it's how
define?
the trust decision gets made. It's uncertainty times vulnerability equals the level of perceived risk.
Equals level of perceived. I know you said this earlier in the talk, but so much went by in my brain that I couldn't. So uncertainty times vulnerability is the level of perceived risk. It, Uncertainty times vulnerability is the level of perceived risk. And is this, thank you for allowing me to interrupt a lot and take you to bigger to prior fundamentals, but is this from the perspective of the person who's trying to figure out if they can trust the other person? Is this from
Yeah.
okay, so that's the hat. The person we are right now is the person who is deciding, can I trust my dad? Can I trust my boss? Can I trust my CEO? Can I trust the government? Can I trust the church? That's the person we're talking about.
Right.
And from
Yeah.
their perspective, your model claims that okay, so you're can I trust, or how much can I trust so and so? You are defining, or at least associating that with what is my perceived risk. Is that accurate? What is
Yeah.
and then you're explicating, okay, can I trust so and so is highly associated with what is my what's the risk to me, and
Yeah.
then your model explicates that as the level of risk to me I judge as my uncertainty times my vulnerability. Is that
That's right.
now? But what does times mean? It's a kind of a mathy thing, but what does it mean exactly in your model?
Well, and it's you're right.
Okay.
It's probably not completely a multiplier,
Okay.
but we know that if we've got high uncertainty, we have to have low vulnerability.
Oh, oh wait, like okay, let me try to give an example. Like uh I'm gonna buy this gold necklace from this guy on the sidewalk. Um, I don't know if I can trust him, so I'm uncertain, but I'm very rich and he's only charging $5, so I have a low vulnerability. Is that a quick
Yes.
example of
Yes. One of the other examples I use is a first date. We
okay.
go for coffee or we go together with friends, right? We don't go to some remote location on our first date. So
Right.
low vulnerability.
Okay, okay. So I think I'm starting to get what you introduced in the first few minutes of our chat. So the more vulnerable I am, meaning the more I have to lose, I guess,
Yeah.
the more harm that may come to me, the more certain I have to be that it won't happen for me to trust, for me to assess my risk level as low and therefore to trust at least the decision, not necessarily the person, but trust the decision to go forward with buying the necklace or going on the date. The the more the more certain I am in the other person and various other contextual surround, the more certain I am, the the more vulnerable I can be and still
Yes.
assess my risk level as low and therefore trust the action that I'm going to do. Is that
Right.
okay?
That's
That's
exactly right.
okay. Okay. So that's okay. So Darryl Stickel is his project is how to build trust. Can I trust so and so? That means what is my risk level in interacting with so and so, buying the necklace, going on the date, and then that and the more uncertain I am, the higher the risk, the less trust. The more vulnerable I am, the higher the risk, the less trust. And the more certain I am, the more I can be vulnerable, and the less vulnerable I am, the more I can tolerate uncertainty. Is
Yes.
okay, 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 okay,
And there's a piece that you twigged onto that I want to circle back to.
okay.
You said that it's important that we think about this from the perspective of the person who's deciding whether to trust or not. And
Right.
that's exactly right, because so often when I teach people this, senior executives will always say to me, well, I do all those things. I show benevolence, I show integrity, I show ability, I explain the context. And my response will always be, says who, right? Because it doesn't matter so much if I think I have your best interest at heart, Bach. It's, do you think I have your best interest at heart?
Oh, that's right. So it's the person who is it's impact, not intent. It's the impact
Yes.
of the person who's trying to gain trust, not the intent of the person who's trying to gain trust. And uh right. And I'm just going to repeat that I may be over repeating, but yes, Darryl, his model could be used by dishonest people, but our intent is for it to be used by honest people. Um, now, when you say, but when you say deciding the person deciding to buy the golden necklace or go on the first date, it in my mind, the the description or action decide to trust was a little bit slippery in my mind, or I'm suspicious of it. It's more like you're deciding to perform a specific action, which is invest in this stock or buy the gold necklace or go on the. You're deciding to do a particular concrete action in reality,
Right.
but couldn't you do that without trusting that person? Or am I using trust, or is my use of trust in that what I just said different from the definition of trust you have in your model?
So
Yeah.
for trust to be even a consideration, for us to use that word, there has to be an element of choice, right? Because if we don't have choice, then we're not trusting. We're just either have faith or we don't in the consequence. There
Right.
has to be some element of uncertainty, because otherwise if we just know, right? I don't trust that the sun will come up. It just does every day. And there has to be some element of vulnerability. And so if
Mm.
$5 for the gold necklace is completely irrelevant to you, then it doesn't require a lot of trust because the level of vulnerability is so low. Um, and a lot of times when I work with organizations or when I give talks, I'll ask people, who do you trust? And they'll come back to me with these close, tight, deep personal relationships, right? Sibling, spouse, parents. And the reality is, Bach, we trust people all the time. When we go to a restaurant, when we get in a cab, when we cross the street, these are all examples of us trusting someone. And it's the social lubricant that allows society to function.
What what does it mean to trust someone?
It's the willingness to be vulnerable
Willingness to be vulnerable.
when you
But
can't completely predict how they're going to behave.
okay, so if I go into Starbucks and go to the cashier and buy coffee and the cashier handles my payment and the barista makes the coffee, that is not an example of trusting the barista or the cashier because there's no I'm certain they're going to do their job and I'm not feeling vulnerable, I'm not feeling uncertain, and all reason supports that it's just going to this is a normal interaction, it's going to flow smoothly, right? So that would not
So
be
you've never heard of a barista spitting in your coffee or
well, no, but there's no evidence, but now I have, thank you. But there's no evidence to suggest. Yes, I have heard stories like if a barista doesn't like a certain person, they'll secretly give them decaf instead of calf. But but let's say I just go to Starbucks and order a coffee. There's no evidence to suggest that there's any foul play. All evidence of reality points to I'm just going to pay for the coffee and get the coffee and then leave. So would you say that's an example where
I'd say that there's a low level of trust involved in that entire interaction.
low level of trust?
So we trust some people more than others,
Yeah.
right? Trust is not a dichotomous variable. It's not either present or absent. It's a continuous variable. So it's in small doses or large ones. And we have the good fortune of living in a society that has reasonably high trust levels. So you don't believe that you're going to get mugged or stabbed on the way to the coffee shop or in the coffee shop. You don't think that the cashier is going to scam your card and start using it for other purchases. You believe that the barista is going to do what they're supposed to do, not slip something into your coffee to make you more compliant or uh, dysfunctional or
Okay.
to cause harm. So there's these assumptions that we make that allow society to function, right? We
Okay.
believe that there are rules and regulations, that there are laws in place, and that people will obey those laws.
Thank you. And you've just to verify, you've defined trust as the willingness to be vulnerable.
Right.
Okay. Um, yeah. So right now I'm thinking my interest is not in pressing further on that. It's more, oh, I'm not, if you want to go somewhere, I'll defer to you. But my interest would be, okay, so level of perceived risk is uncertainty times vulnerability, and then we went on a journey into my asking what does the times mean, and then we got into where we are now. But back to the
Right.
level of perceived risk is uncertainty and vulnerability, and under uncertainty to reduce someone's uncertainty, there were four levers a person could pull from, which and those levers are benevolence, integrity, ability, and context.
Right.
And then we were in the middle of that in context, so we maybe return to that. And then a brief aside, then vulnerability, you said there were two to reduce someone's to reduce how vulnerable someone feels. You were beginning to introduce two levers. Was that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we get to vulnerability, vulnerability is really squishy
Okay.
because it's around scarcity, right? And so when I was a doctoral student, $20 felt like a large level of vulnerability. And then I got a job at McKinsey and Company, and it didn't feel like such a big deal anymore, right? $20 was less scarcity for me. I felt less vulnerable if somebody asked me to borrow $20. And so our vulnerability is very subjective. And the two levers are what do I think is at stake and how do I value it?
What is at stake? What is at stake, and how do
And
I
how do
value
I value?
how
Right.
how do I value it? I
How do I value whatever's at stake? And so when we think about vulnerability, we think about it in fairly concrete terms, and that's often a mistake on our part. So I agreed to be on your show. What are my vulnerabilities? You could ask me questions that I'm not comfortable with or that I can't answer. I could look like an idiot. Um,
Hmm.
it, it could be shared with people that I don't agree with or groups that are, misaligned with my values. You've talked a number of times about there might be a group of con men sitting and listening to this podcast who plan to do great harm. Um, and I would feel some level of responsibility to that. We can often have both a perception of the vulnerability in the moment, but also with linked outcomes, right? That this will lead to something else, which will lead to something else, which will lead to something else, which inflates our sense of vulnerability. And so if we understand what people think is at stake and we understand the value that they place on it and are able to provide them with alternatives, we can actually take steps to help them feel less vulnerable. And we see examples of this. You go to an ice cream store, they offer you a taste of all the different flavors before you make your decision about buying a cone, right? And I say, hey, let me try a little taster spoon of that rum raisin. And then I realize I don't like rum and I don't like raisin. I'm really glad I didn't get a whole cone of that and end up throwing it away.
What is at stake is the 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 potential loss or harm to you.
Yeah,
For example, I spent $5 on that ice cream, but I don't like it. Like so, okay. So what's at stake is inherently a negative thing as you're defining it. It's not a positive thing.
right.
Okay.
And and so let's expand on that example. I buy the $5 cone and I don't like it, but I've got friends around me who start to mock me for making bad decisions, right? So I'm more vulnerable and I'm not one of the cool kids. And I could have spent that $5 on something else for that cone.
In this
Uh,
example, would it have to be that when you're deciding whether to buy the ice cream, you have in mind that your friends may mock you because you would have to know it for it to be a part of your
yes.
right, right.
Yeah, it'd be part of the equation for your vulnerability, right? And so
What harm could come to me?
what harm could come to me?
Right. And oh, okay, okay. And the what is at stake lever refers to someone, the person who's trying to build trust, trying to convince you that that harm won't happen.
It's trying to understand. So if you and I were talking, you were saying to me, Daryl, I've always wanted to try rum raisin, but I'm worried that people are going to make fun of me if I order it and then I end up not liking it. And I say to you, well, Bach, just try a taster, right? Try the smaller dose to see if you like it or not. Or let's let's pose the conversation to the rest of the group saying, has anyone ever tried a flavor that they haven't tried before? Because I was thinking about trying, pralines and cream, and I've never tried it before. And I don't know if I would like it. I know some other people like it. And so
Oh,
we,
to preempt the mocking, the possible mocking from the friends.
right, right.
I
And
see.
so
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
so we can take steps, or I could say to you, you know what, Bach, order something you're used to this time. You and I'll come when it's just us. And you can try rum raisin another time. And then there won't be the opportunity for mocking.
This is uh big picture comment. I'm learning more and more. So a lot to me was new in this conversation, which I'm not used to. This it's a learning experience for me talking to someone who's developed a model and then at the same time learning what exactly is a model and having an example of the model. So what's coming up to me is you're doing epistemology, just how to do life, how to think, how to make actions, and then you're carving out a specific niche and angle, and then getting very detailed and constructing a model within the overall project of doing life, thinking, making decisions, epistemology. That's my, am I right?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, okay.
And I'm trying to make it simple.
Yeah,
So when I teach this stuff to people, regular people say, of course, this is how it works. This feels like common sense. How did you get a PhD for this?
that's
Academics who study trust look at this and they go, Dear God, you're decades ahead of us.
what can we go there? Can you elaborate? The people who say you're decades ahead of other trust research, could you expand on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So um, I had a conversation with Amy Edmondson, who's famous for psychological safety research. She's a chaired professor at Harvard at the business school. Um, and I said to her, everyone's talking about trust. They're talking about how important it is, how little we have of it, but no one's talking about how to actually build it. And she said, Okay, Darryl, fine. Tell me how to build it. And so I did. I talked her through the model and how to pull the levers. And she said, You talk about this like no one else on the planet. And there's a couple reasons for that. Overwhelmingly, the trust research focuses on uncertainty. And it talks about benevolence, integrity, and ability. Those are the three levers that they talk about. They don't so much talk about how to apply them, which is the work that I often end up doing, but they talk about those as the levers that lead to perceptions of trustworthiness. They don't talk about context. And the work that I did with the Canadian military, trying to help them figure out how to build trust with the locals in Afghanistan during the occupation, um, showed me that context is actually carries the most weight early on, right? Because one guy with a machine gun looks a lot like another guy with a machine gun. And so our understanding of context or our perceptions of context actually drive our perceptions of uncertainty far more early in a relationship. And that weight shifts as we get to know the other person better. The trust
The
research also, oh, let me just spin
Yeah,
through
yeah, sure.
why my work is different and why they make that comment, and then we'll circle back.
No.
They don't talk about vulnerability, which allows us to talk about depths of relationships. Trust in the literature is treated like a dichotomous variable. People either trust or they don't. And the reality is that we trust some people more than others. And your coffee example is an example of a low trust setting where trust is acting as a social lubricant to allow us to engage and exchange and actually be in the world in a way that allows us to feel comfortable. After we've made the trust decision, there's a perceived outcome. And we interpret the world through stories. You and I can have exactly the same experience, but have a dramatically different perception of what just happened. And so understanding that and the levers that influence that is important. And it circles back into our next engagement. And in the middle of all this is our emotional states, whether we like or dislike one another. And the trust research treats people like they're rational actors, and we're just not. Okay.
Okay, this is uh I'm enjoying this very much and I value this very much. I just want to share that. There's a lot of units and I'm very interested in all of them. Okay. Uh could you give an example of the perceived outcome after the trust decision and how different people can come at it differently and how that informs a later step or something like that? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, I can talk about it in vague terms, like we perform a project, and some of us think it's successful, some of us don't. A lot of times, what I do with organizations is I'll get them to define what good looks like before we engage rather than after, because that tends to be what happens so often. Um, we can have the experience of going to a ball game and our team loses, but some of the young players performed well. And so we think the future has great potential. Or maybe my son was involved and he had a good game, even though the team lost. I might think that was a good outcome, whereas the rest of the
Mhm.
fans think it was a bad one. And so
Okay,
go
at,
ahead.
so at there in the example you're talking about currently, there's more than just two people, obviously. It just dawned on me, of course, you're talking about it just dawned on me. He works with organizations, he works with large groups, whereas my original in my mind it was just one person. Do I trust this other person? But now that you're
Right,
talking about groups of people, then you have that many different minds, and you have to use your model for all those different minds, right?
right.
And you're questioning. There should not be an assumption that people act rationally. So, okay, so let me get back to what is unique. Okay, some people in the trust field have said your work is decades ahead of others' work, and I asked why. And if I'm getting you right, first, you're practically oriented.
Right,
How do we actually build trust as opposed to just having some theoretical or conceptual understanding of it? How do we actually build it? That's one big fundamental move. And then within that, to the extent that others have that practical orientation, they they use the three levers of benevolence, integrity, and ability, or either they don't use them or they use them, and you're introducing context and also trying to focus on the other three and make them more practical. And you're
right,
introducing, in addition to the established concept of uncertainty, you're introducing vulnerability as a major factor, and with it associated with that uh, added concept, you're saying we should not assume people are just going to be rational. So those are some high level elements of what is distinct
right.
to your approach, and features that people have called on as making you decades ahead of other trust researchers. Is that all
Right.
accurate?
Yeah,
Okay. So when you within vulnerability, the two levers of what is at stake and how do I value what is at stake, you gave some. My question is trying to form as I speak, but
sure.
did you explain both of them together earlier in our chat, or did you not get to the second one? The how do I value what is at stake?
So how do I value is really around the scarcity piece, right? If I'm worried about losing my job, if there are plenty of jobs in the environment, I'm less concerned, right? If I've got 4 or 5 job offers pending, losing my job isn't a big deal. But if I have this job and
Okay.
jobs are scarce and my family's in dire need of the income that I have, the level of vulnerability is really high.
Oh, I see. Okay. The what is at stake could be my job. The how do I value what is at stake could be dependent on how easy is it to get another job versus how hard, right?
Right. And what the needs are. Like, do you have a buffer? Do you have a cushion? Do you have sick family members? So how valuable it is can vary across individuals, right? If I'm single and I've got 6 months salary in the bank and I might lose my job, it's a different story than if I've got 2 kids in college, my wife's got medical bills, and I'm the sole breadwinner. Those are two different stories. And the level of vulnerability we experience with those is dramatically different.
Okay. So yes. Um, Now, uh, one question is there's a lot going on in my mind. I'm trying to parse out. Is 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 this model is this model intended? I think the answer is going to be yes, but I'm just going to ask anyway. Is this model intended for non-simple, obvious cases of decision making? Just as an example, um, she's on an app and the guy says, "Hey, come over to my place at 3 a.m. I have some alcohol. Drive over and let's have a party." Now, she could just very quickly and commonsensically say, "No, I'm good," like because of the danger.
Right,
It doesn't require a lot of concepts and analysis in that particular case, right?
right,
A motivation of your model is when life is complex, you're dealing with businesses and organizations, a lot, we're talking about military, we're talking about CEOs and organizations, we're talking about family structures. That's when this model becomes much more useful when it's not simple and not fast obvious, right? Is it
yes and no.
is my point?
So here's the thing is when I flip the original question, who do you trust? When I ask who trusts you, right?
Yeah.
Of senior executives, I'll get this long pause and then people will start to give me the same list of people back, but it's hesitant. And then eventually someone will say, how would I know? How do I know if somebody trusts me or not? And to answer that question, Bach, we go back to the definition, willingness to be vulnerable. So how can people be vulnerable to me and are they, right? How can they make themselves vulnerable? And so if I'm a leader, my people can make themselves vulnerable by telling me what their real development needs are, by bringing me bad news first, by pushing back against ideas they don't think are going to work, by trying new things, knowing that they might fail, right? By innovating and speaking up. Those are all ways that they can make themselves vulnerable. And the question becomes, do they? Right? And so if they kind of do or kind of don't, then that means that trust levels could be higher. And so if I'm a parent, do my kids tell me things that are going on with them? Do they admit that they've made mistakes? Do they try to thrive on their own and develop their own sets of skills? Do they push back against things in a way that's reasoned and rational? Are they able to communicate with me? And so these are all examples of when trust levels are higher. And so we're not just talking about extreme cases. We're talking about a set of behaviors that encourage trust in others, that allow them to make themselves vulnerable to us on a more regular basis. And for
Uh,
me, um, for me, the thing that differentiates, because the more senior you become, the less direct control you have over outcomes. The more dependent you are on those you lead to reach all of your goals and objectives. And so you need them to trust you enough to take chances, to do the things that are required, to engage in what we call organizational citizenship behaviors, going above and beyond.
may I?
Yeah,
Thank you. So thank you for all that. So I think my example of do I go to the guy's house at 3 a.m. and he's offering me drugs and alcohol, I cherry picked a triggering case and an extreme case where many people think will
right.
come. So I admit, or I don't think I did anything wrong, but I'll still say I admit
No, no,
my example is cherry picked. And you're saying one thing you're saying is Bach, even in normal living, which is very complex already, these concepts come into play in just building trust with your children, building trust with your parent, building trust with your friends, neighbors at work. And so that's one thing you're saying, I think. And another thing you're saying is when you're talking about CEOs and leaders in high level positions who don't have direct control for all the people under them, that requires that's even more motivation for these concepts in trust building because you don't have direct control. Um,
right.
right. Okay, I'm with you. And did you have something? I have another question, but did you have something before that?
Well, so for me, I'm never more vulnerable than when it comes to my kids.
Yes,
I
please.
can't tolerate a lot of uncertainty, right? And so there's multiple ways for me to get there to reduce my uncertainty. One is for them to actually communicate with me and know that there's an open line of communication and share information. Another is for me to try to monitor and control their behavior. That second one, the command and control style, it's really addictive because it works early on. And then when it doesn't, it really doesn't. And it blows up the relationship. And so learning how to get your kids to trust you, because when they do, they share information with you, they give you the benefit of the doubt, they have a positive story about you. When you try to control them, the worst thing that can happen is that they let you, because that then sets them up really well to be controlled by whoever comes along next.
A danger, a danger of trying to control your children is that they don't trust you. Another danger is that if they if they are control if they submit to the control, they are more likely to submit to control from other people.
Yeah,
Okay, I got you right on that reflection.
you did.
Okay,
Yeah,
uh, uh, here's a cluster of questions. How do you build but I think they're tightly related. How do you build trust with your kids? What do you mean by trying to control them? What does letting go of control look like concretely? And are there examples? That's it, just whatever you want to take of that on.
sure. So, the way you build trust with your kids is using the model. It's what I've done with, I've got two sons who are 24 and 21. Um, and their whole lives I've talked to them about trust. And, I've included them in conversations around benevolence. I've shown them integrity. I've shown them ability. And for each of these things, so for example, when it comes to ability, I've actually asked them the question, what's a good dad look like? What would it look like if I was a really good dad? And I got to tell you, that's a terrifying question to ask your kids. Because what if they say not you, right? But as a leader or as a parent, we should start by realizing that we're not the sole arbiter of what good looks like, of excellence. We can have a notion, and when I lead a workshop or I teach a class, I start by saying, what would make this the best class you've ever been in? What would make this the best workshop you've ever experienced? And we write out a list. So we come to a shared understanding of what good looks like.
Does that
When it
fall?
come,
Sorry,
go
go ahead.
ahead.
Does that
No, no.
does what you're describing, asking the other person what does a good what would success look like in this context? Does asking that fall under one of the benevolence or integrity or ability or context under
It's
uncertainty?
ability and it's also perceived outcomes.
Its ability, its ability, because you're asking them
What would good look like?
what would good look like, which refers to what you would be able to do, right? And then
Right,
perceived outcomes is a oh right, that's just referring to what results do you want, right?
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so then we go through the course and I try to hit those marks. And I ask them as I'm going along, how am I doing against this? Right. And are there other things you want to add to what excellence is? And by the end, I ask them, did I hit the mark? Did I do what we agreed excellence would look like?
Wait, but you may not agree with their answer, right? Or are you like, what if they say, well, a good dad is one who never asks me any questions, and
Right.
they say that. So what can you actually go with that? So what do you do in that?
Yeah. So it's a shared definition, right?
Okay.
And so then I would explain, here's why I ask questions. And here's why I want to know more. And so my sons know that I'm never more vulnerable than when it comes to them. And I've told them I can't handle a lot of uncertainty. So my head goes to really awful places.
Okay.
And they care about me and they love me. And so they know that dad's sitting at home thinking that they've been involved in some auto accident or somebody's harmed them or something's gone horribly wrong if I don't hear. And so they check in and
When,
they
sorry.
tell me where they're going and they tell me who they're hanging out with. not because I'm trying to control them, but because they know dad can't handle a lot of uncertainty when it comes to this.
You're never more vulnerable than when it comes to your children, and that means I know on a common sense level, everyone has a sense of what that means, but within this model, that means that you are you're never more uncomfortable with uncertainty than with your children. Is that right?
That's right.
Understand, trying to understand your model,
Yeah.
and I've lost wider context about how does that come into building trust with your kids. Um,
So when I build trust with my kids, I take active steps to reduce their uncertainty. I explain how I'm constrained. So I'm a dad who's legally blind. I've got post-concussion syndrome from a variety of concussions. Um, and so that's my context, right? I I get fatigued. I need to sleep. I can't drive. I couldn't play catch with them. There's a bunch of things I can't do. And they don't attribute that to me. They attribute that to the context. And
could
when
you
they,
what's context briefly again?
it's the, it's the rules of the game.
Rules of the
It's
game.
how we're constrained.
Okay.
And so my context is that I'm a Canadian dad who's got a PhD in business, who, you know, has worked at McKinsey and Company, who is uh, considered one of the world's leading experts on trust. There's a bunch of different pieces of me that are part of my context.
It it sounds like context is just reality, the facts of reality, or the facts of the world. Is that right or close?
It's a
Or
big part of it, yeah. And so I'm able to explain to them what I can and can't do,
right.
right? And so when I say to them, what does good look like? They talk to me about the time that I spend with them and how, I have a relentlessly positive story about my sons. And so I'm always waiting to hear their side of it when things go wrong. I'm I've got a positive skew on information that comes in about them.
Mm.
Um, I help them reinterpret the world in a positive way. And I've prepared them. I think that, the world is moving so fast, Bach, that our social skills are one of the few things that are going to allow us to be more resilient in a world that's moving so quickly. And so I've trained them with those skills. And and so when we talk about what good looks like, it's not something that's beyond my capacity. They know that there are certain things I can't do, but there are certain things that I do very well. And so when I make commitments to them, I try to make commitments that aren't about outcomes, but rather about my efforts, because I don't always control the outcomes. And they know what my values are, right? Because I've expressed them often and that they come first for me. And they've seen that manifest and play out over and over and over again. And when it comes to the conversation around benevolence, a lot of times we have people's best interests at heart, but it doesn't look like that. And so, how do we communicate it in a way that lands? And for your audience, I'm going to give them a conversation that they can have tomorrow with anyone that they
Okay.
choose to try it on.
Nice.
It's heard this guy Darryl, he was talking about benevolence, which is just a fancy word for having someone else's best interest at heart, having their back. And I think I do that, but it doesn't always land that way. Have you ever experienced that? And the other person's overwhelmingly going to say, "Oh my God, yes." Get curious about that, right? What was it that they misinterpreted? What was your intent? How did it go wrong? Then you narrow the funnel and you say, has someone ever really had your back? What did they do? What did it look like? How did it feel? Now we're priming them to think about their best interests and what success looks like for them. And we're including them in that conversation. We're getting hints about what benevolence looks like for them. Then we narrow the funnel further and we say, what is success for you? How do I help you get there? And now we've created an opportunity for transparency. so that when we're trying to act in their interest later, we can recall back to that conversation and say, you remember when you told me this is what good looks like? This is me trying to help you get there.
Thank you. Benevolent. Here's an objection or a critical question on benevolence for you.
Sure.
Um, shouldn't we not have the other person's best interest at heart? So I'm just trying to, the example in mind is like you just have, maybe I'm talking about context that you're not talking about, but let me just go with it. So two businesses negotiating a deal. I want a software license from you. Now that business totally correctly, is my view, wants to make as much money as possible from selling their software license, and then the business trying to buy it is trying to pay as little as possible. And both so the business that's selling the software license has their own best interest at heart. And I Bach am saying that I think that's totally correct. And then the business who's trying to buy the software license has their own best interest at heart, and I, Bach, think that is correct too.
Okay.
So they each should have their own best interest at heart and not have the other person's best interest at heart. So I'm just offering that as, how does that fit into your model, or is there a philosophical disagreement here between us or between you and other people, or capitalism, or etc.? Yeah.
So if I'm in the business of selling licenses, then I may want this software to proliferate. And my best interest might not be getting the most out of this particular sale, but having a good reputation to make future sales. And I don't want to give it away, but I do want to make money off of it. And so this is the tension that we see in negotiation research, where one stream of research talks about getting the most you can out of a specific deal, and the Harvard negotiation project approach of getting to yes, which is broadening the deal so that there's benefit to be had for both parties. And so, do I think about getting an extra 10 cents off this deal, or do I think about the potential for future deals with this same partner? The example I'll give you is I was working with a mutual fund company. They were one of my first clients, and they were uh, selling mutual funds to financial advisors. And their entire approach was trying to get a larger percentage of the book for the sales advisors, right? So going from 10% to 11%. And I said, you're following the wrong approach. What you should be trying to do is double the size of that guy's book, because 10% of twice as much is twice as much. And when they started to change their approach to a more relational approach and started trying to actively grow their clients' portfolios, and during that process actually gave them advice to choose other funds when they had better products, their share of the book size went up dramatically over time. In fact, they generated 75 cents of every new dollar that came into the industry in Canada for the next 2 years.
I think I was excited to say something. Did you want to finish? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think I'm getting, so when you say benevolence is having the other person's best interest at heart, you do not mean at your own expense or to your self-destruction or self-sacrifice. You mean having a long-term wide context view, having the other best, having the other person's best interest at heart is instrumental to your best interest long term. That's implied in, I think, based on what I'm
Yeah,
from you, in benevolence. It's not I'm gonna go out of business because I'm just gonna give away my product for free, and then all my employees have to quit because I can't pay them. It's not self-destruction. It's you're advancing your
no,
self-interest by having other people's best interests at heart, right?
right. And you may take a shave in the short term, right?
Right.
Um, you may take 10% less on this deal, knowing that it'll lead to other deals that allow you to be more successful. Or you've even created someone as a potential partner down the road whose strength will benefit you in the long run.
Right. Okay. Uh, Pivoting back to big picture again, the how do I how do I get others to trust me? The model is uh trust. Someone's level of trust in you is their uncertainty times their vulnerability, and you have levers to work with each. The levers for uncertainty are benevolence, integrity, ability, and context. The levers associated with vulnerability are what is at stake and how do I value what is at stake. I'm just repeating
Right.
that. That's what we and
That's 6 of the 10 levers so far.
oh man, are we ready? I'm ready. Are you ready for the other
I'm
four?
ready.
Yeah, let's do it.
So the other two, the next two are in perceived outcomes. It's was it a success or failure, and who gets the credit or the blame? So attribution.
Successful. Who attribution is who gets the credit or the blame. So
Yeah,
a bigger picture question. So is are perceived outcomes in your model on a sibling to uncertainty and vulnerability, or is it a separate thing in the model? It just also has levers on with it.
it comes out after the trust decision, and it feeds into the next interaction.
Oh, okay, okay. So uncertainty and vulnerability times each other is the perceived level of risk, and then there were six levers that we associated that we touched on, and then after some decision, there's the outcome, and that's what we're talking about now, and then attached to which are two levers.
Right. And it that perception of the outcome then feeds back into the uncertainty and vulnerability
Feeds back.
evaluations the next time we engage.
Okay, I see the not okay, great. And we can do all this without visuals. That's amazing. Okay, or at least I can try. So
Right.
uh so we have perceived outcome is was it a success or a failure, and blame and praise attributed to whom is the second.
Yeah.
So please elaborate. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of times, so when my son was playing baseball, um, he wanted to get a baseball scholarship to go play in college. And he said, Dad, the team I'm on is really young and inexperienced. We're going to lose a lot this year. And I said, well, then you need to redefine success from the team goal of winning games to something that's within your control, right? So, what would a good season look like for you? And he said, well, I'd get better with my skills. I'd have a good season in terms of my production offensively and defensively. I said, yeah, and you need to have good relationships with your coaches and be a good teammate. These are all the things that colleges are going to evaluate you on. And so we went through and we defined what a good season would look like for him. And, it was about mentoring younger players. It was about having good stats for himself, performing well for himself. It was about contributing to the team positively in terms of the culture, having good relationships with the coaches. And so he would come back every once in a while and say, wow, we got just crushed again. Right. Because, I went to the games whenever I could, but he would say, we got just crushed again. And I said, yeah, but how are you doing against your goals? Well, I went 3 for 4 and was actually able to help one of the young guys figure out his batting stance a little better. And so we were able to redefine what success looked like, what a good outcome looked like. And I was actually able to nudge him about things like his grades in school, his diet, his exercise routine, his work habits, all those things that parents like to bug their kids about, except that he interpreted it as me having his back for his aspiration of getting a baseball scholarship, which he did, right? He was successful in that goal.
Mm.
But we had defined what success looked like and defined it around things that he had control over.
Yes. And did you discuss the second lever in that what in your content just now?
So who gets the credit or who gets the blame?
Yeah, yeah,
He got the credit, right? He
right.
he took credit for his successes. His coaches gave him credit for working hard. It wasn't a context thing. It wasn't, well, you just got lucky. It was clear that it was his work.
Can you connect? I follow what you're saying, and it for me it falls under this is good life activity, like setting goals, assessing what happened, uh, but I was losing the connection to trust and the project of building trust.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in part, it's a case of him trusting me, right? So I help him set those goals. He feels like he had a successful season. He feels like he was the one who drove that, and he was.
Hmm.
And so when it feeds back into his next, Dad, I'm going to college now. How do I define what success looks like in school? So for me, there was a positive outcome from his engagement with me. He also built trust with his teammates, with his coaches, by showing up and having positive outcomes to his activities. So he was able to show his ability
Oh, okay.
by being a good player. He was able to show integrity by saying he wanted the team to perform well and taking steps and actions to help other players improve. He showed benevolence by having the best interests of his teammates at heart, best interests of his coaches at heart.
Yeah.
So he's pulling those levers. They're seeing him be successful on the field. He makes the all-star team. He performs very well on a team that struggles, and that leads to him having positive interactions and engagements with those people in the future. His coaches actually go out of their way to recommend him for colleges. They're willing to put their reputation at risk by making referrals.
I thank you. I realize now I was dropping a bit of context. Someone coming at someone with the idea of trust in their mind, but without learning your model would have would have come up with my question of what does this have to do with trust? But then I realized we're talking about this model of trust. So there's an assumed context of trust is this concept. It deserves investigation. Here are other concepts involved in it, and that's the wider context. So I'm just noting that for
Right.
myself and for right with you. Um, I this may not be directly related to what you were saying, but something came up when you talked about making promises not about outcomes but effort. Maybe you were only talking about between you and your children or families or parenting, but I was thinking that would not fly in the business world. Like we're gonna try our best, but we're not gonna say that we're gonna deliver a product. I mean, that's just gonna lead to no one trusting anyone because all you're doing is promising your effort. You're not promising, I want the product that I paid for. I want you to make some,
Right.
right? Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So none of this is black and white. It's shades of gray,
Okay. Yeah.
right? And so I was talking with the CEO and his head of sales, and I said, how do you determine whether the head of sales has done a good job or not? Well, he hits his numbers. How do you know the numbers were set properly in the first place? Right? How do you have a sense of that? Well, history. What if the market changes and one of your competitors goes out of business and he couldn't help but hit his numbers? A chimpanzee could have hit his numbers,
Oh,
right? And
yeah.
so you haven't really defined what good looks like in terms of that pure outcome. Or what if there's a market crash and no one's buying your product and the greatest salesman on earth couldn't have hit those numbers? How do you know that he's good at what he does unless you're measuring his process? So purely relying on outcomes is often a challenge. And, we often overcommit. What if the example you have is, yeah, we're going to develop this product, but it turns out that there's technology that's involved or needed that we don't have yet. Or if somebody else nudges the competitive environment, comes out with something better before you finish, and the decision becomes, let's scrap that project and work on the next iteration of it. There's things outside of our control. And this is one of the reasons that I get people to focus on the topic of trust, because so much of what drives your success is actually beyond your control. The success of an organization can be determined by government regulation, by competition, by the economy. There's all these different things that can drive success or failure. What you have control over is your own actions. And so, yes, we do want to be able to make commitments about meeting objectives and hitting timelines and all those kinds of things. But in reality, those are the end result of combined efforts.
And a big picture comment I thought I had is that building trust, you're saying and assuming in your whole project is an undervalued, underdiscussed, underappreciated, crucial element of business success, relational success.
Right. All the research that we see tells us that teams, and this is more sort of observational than applied,
Mm.
that teams with higher trust levels, organizations with higher trust levels are more efficient, they're more effective, they have higher returns to shareholders, they have higher client satisfaction, higher customer engagement, higher employee engagement. They just do better. We know that. But what we're not seeing is people actually investing in building it because they don't know how, right? I was at a conference being held at Duke. They were talking about rebuilding trust in institutions. And they were telling all these horror stories about how bad things are getting. And they said, some of these numbers look like end of democracy kinds of numbers. And somebody in the crowd finally said, okay, so how do we build it? What do we do? And the moderator looked into the camera and just said, we don't know. And I
Wow.
know, right? That's what I do. And so overwhelmingly, and if we want to talk about why trust levels are so low right now, Bach, it's because it's uncertainty times vulnerability. Our vulnerability hasn't gone down. We feel as vulnerable or more vulnerable than we ever have. But our uncertainty is bouncing all over the place. And so
I yeah,
asking people to be just a little more vulnerable is harder than it's ever been.
I want to get oh I want to pursue some things you just talked about, but I feel like could we just get the other two levers introduced,
Yeah,
and then we can,
yeah.
okay, please, please.
Uh, it's it's in emotions, like or dislike. So do I like or dislike the person that I'm engaged with? And what are my own emotional states? Am I happy or am I sad? And so if we like people, we're more likely to trust them. We're more likely to see the outcomes as positive. We're more likely to attribute that positive outcome to them. And it makes us like them even more, which can create these virtuous cycles. When we dislike people, we look for reasons not to trust them. We find confirming evidence of the fact that they're a bad person. We're less likely to trust them. We're less likely to see the outcome as positive. Even if it is positive, we attribute it to the context rather than them. Makes us like them even less, which can lead to these vicious cycles.
Mm.
And so, a lot of times when we see these long term disputes, the reason they're so resilient is we're trying these cognitive, rational approaches to resolving what are fundamentally emotional problems.
Did you just discuss the second one, or were you you just mentioned emotional problems, but you were discussing like and dislike and trust and distrust. Uh,
Happy, sad is the other
yeah,
one.
please.
And so, if people are feeling down, if their mood is deflated, they feel vulnerable already, right? Their perceptions of vulnerability are inflated,
Oh,
and their willingness to trust may be reduced.
are these two okay? I follow you. Thank you. Uh, are these two levers associated with some concept that you have not yet introduced? Because I have the perceived outcomes there were two, and then the the uncertainty there were four, and the vulnerability there were two. And these final two, are they?
They're within emotions, which sort of sits in the center of the model.
Oh, so emotions is a category, and then and the likes and dislikes and happy sad fall under that. So you
Yeah.
am I right that on some uh, uh, in the hierarchy, if I'm right in saying there's a hierarchy of the model, uncertainty, vulnerability, and perceived outcomes and emotions are roughly on one level or something like that? Or
So for me, it would be bases of trust, which are uncertainty and vulnerability,
yeah,
which leads to a box called the trust decision, which is that comparison of my risk versus my threshold of risk that I can tolerate.
yeah.
Then there'd be another box after the trust decision, which is perceived outcomes. And it would have an arrow that loops back into the basis of trust. And in the middle of that box, above that arrow, would be our emotional states. And there'd be an arrow that goes up into the emotions and it comes out from the emotions back to those bases of trust and out to the perceived outcomes.
Okay. Did you get that,
Does that
audience?
make sense?
You better have gotten that, my audience. Yes, yes, yes.
Well, they can read the book if they want.
Right, right. No, so
The
it's not so much that I expect that I would retain it or my audience would retain it, but just for you to introduce it, and then we can burrow further. Um, two At this point, I had thought of two objections and see what you
Sure.
think. One objection is um when you in the argument backed by whatever research you cite that that building trust is crucial for success. I'm really
Right.
essentializing. Are there people who object to you and say, yeah, you're right, trust is correlated with success, but so are these other variables XYZ, and then we could get the same results by focusing on XYZ. It's a form. I don't have the objection because I don't know that your field, but it's a form of objection. I'm wondering if you have encountered that form and if you would care to address that objection at all.
Um, so I haven't heard that objection.
Oh, okay. All right.
I've heard pretty overwhelmingly that trust is critical for society. There's a recent Nobel Prize winners in economics wrote the book called Why Nations Fail. And the underlying element was predictability of institutions. So it was trust within those societies. It was reduced uncertainty for those institutions, which drives economic investment. It drives performance of organizations. It's a social lubricant. So I haven't heard anyone say, no, we could just replace trust with something else
Mm.
and get the same results. The concern is the one you listed early, which is trusting too much, right? Naive trust, um, being too vulnerable too quickly. And so there can be a dysfunctional element to trusting too much. And I've had people say to me, you're saying that trust is always good, and my response is it isn't always good. It's more important to trust appropriately. And they followed that up. This was in an academic setting where they're trying to have a gotcha moment. And they said, well, and then you said more trust is always better. And I said, absolutely not. And they said, give an example when trust is not good. And I gave the example of Brownie being in charge of FEMA during the Katrina hurricane. You had somebody in charge of disaster relief who wasn't competent for the job and people died. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want people to trust me more than they should. I don't want people giving me their car keys and telling me to drive down the street when I'm legally blind. I want to be trusted appropriately. And for me to do that, I have to be aware of how much people should trust me and communicate that as effectively as I can.
Yes, I have. Okay, good. When you ask, um, whom do you trust or who trusts you, many people will object, well, that's too vague. It's
Yeah,
always trust to do what, get my coffee,
yeah,
not spit in my coffee. So you're asking a loaded, slippery question when you ask, who do you trust? Who can I trust? Yeah, can you address that?
right. And part of the reason I asked that question is to provoke this notion that we have a lack of awareness about who we trust and how much we trust them.
Hmm.
And when you ask that question, most people aren't as introspective as you are, Bach.
Oh, thank
They
you.
don't they don't think through the implications of these things, which you're doing a great job of doing. Um, they say, "Oh yeah, I trust this person," because my response, if somebody said, "Who do you trust?" would be with what, right? Because I had a good friend of mine, Kevin Doyle, was at one of my presentations, and I said, "Kevin, do you trust me?" And he said, "Yeah, absolutely, I trust you." And I said, "Great, can I borrow your car?" And I said, "Now, before you answer, I know that I'm legally blind and I can't actually see out the front windshield. And I know it's Toronto in the middle of winter and there's a blizzard outside. And, I can't actually see out the windshield to start with. But in the words of Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, I really am an excellent driver."
Mm.
I said, "So can I borrow your car?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, what's the deal here? I asked you if you trust me. You said yes. And then I ask you to make yourself vulnerable and you say no." And the reality is that Kevin does trust me. I stayed at his house with his family when I visit Toronto. Um, we talk about things that matter to him. We're good friends, but not there. And he didn't know it wasn't there until we reached that spot. And a lot of times we don't know how much we trust someone until we hit that place where we're like, "Oh, I'm uncomfortable now." And so we have a generalized notion of what trust is and how it works. But until you and I start deconstructing it, we're not aware that there's still a little bit of uncertainty between Kevin and I. And so there are certain vulnerabilities that he's uncomfortable with, right? And so
Yeah.
does that make sense? Does that answer the
Yes, it does
question?
make sense. It makes sense. And there are questions and thoughts percolating, and I'm currently I'm listening to you, and at the same time, there's a lot. It's a common thing with my brain. Um, the thought that one thought that came to mind is someone saying, and maybe this even represents my opinion in this current moment.
Sure.
Is this It sounds like a superfluous concept sometimes. I know your specialty is trust. I know you have a PhD in it. I know that's what I know we're talking about trust, but uh, at least in many contexts, that concept doesn't come up explicitly in my living. It's just, I'm going to buy coffee. A friend wants to borrow money. Do I say yes or no?
Right.
It's not, I'm going to think about it and make a decision, but,
It just happens. It's automatic.
or the concepts, or there will be concepts involved, but, um, I don't know how often that particular term comes up. And that may be connected to well, whenever you ask, do you trust someone or do they trust you? You immediately go to trust them to do what? So you're already thinking in concrete terms. Um,
Right. So you're right around the edges of the fact that this is a really it can be a really fuzzy construct. And it's this lack of awareness. And a lot of times when we reach a spot where we're uncomfortable, like, are you going to go on a date? Are you going to ask someone to dance? Are you going to, we get this feeling in the pit of our stomach like, oh my God. And we don't know, we don't identify it as trust and we don't know how to resolve it. And so when we start to think of it as a trust problem or a situation that's involving trust, if we understand the model, we can actually start deconstructing why am I uncomfortable? What's the uncertainty I'm experiencing? What's the vulnerability? What's the worst case scenario? And when I coach leaders, and we frame these things as trust problems, it gives them actual applied approaches that they can take to making things easier, to solving some of these problems that they're having. And
Yeah.
you're right, it's hard to measure because we often don't think about it as trust. And so we have this profound lack of awareness about what trust is, how it works, and a lack of intentionality about how to build it. And so we often miss out on opportunities because we feel like I'm uncomfortable, I'm just going to walk away, rather than I'm uncomfortable. What questions do I need to ask to get comfortable, to make a better decision, to make a more informed decision?
Yes, I think what's coming up right now is first, to return to what's practical, you're doing work that produces majorly positive real life results for leaders, for organizations, for groups that is majorly beneficial. Those are
Right.
facts that I'm saying that are not in dispute at all. So I was just getting more theoretical, conceptual about what exactly does trust mean? Do we need the concept that much? How does it relate to, do I feel safe versus unsafe? How does it relate to, do I feel
Right.
comfortable versus uncomfortable? So, but the person getting deep and nuanced about those concepts, it does is separate from the fact that whatever you're doing is producing results.
Right.
Right, right.
So I'll give you an example of one of the students I had, because every workshop I do or every course I teach, I get people to apply the concepts
Mhm.
because that's how we really learn. And so I get them to pick someone to be their trust partner and start applying, asking questions. Because in the book, I lay out the whole model and I lay out the 10 levers and I lay out ways to pull those levers, right? Examples of ways to pull those levers, to show benevolence, to show integrity, to show ability, to have conversations that lead to people perceiving those things more effectively.
Yeah.
And so one of my students came to me and he said, I'd like to actually have my trust partners be my two sons who are 5 and 3. And I said, okay. I said, what's the challenge? And he said, I was teaching in Luxembourg. And he said, I've been working in Brazil most of their lives. So I'm rarely home. When I am home, I don't know what to do. They're terrified of me. I lose my temper. I don't know how to approach them. I think the relationship's broken forever. And so during the 3 month course, I taught him the model. I coached him on how to pull the different levers with his kids. His end report was things have changed completely. My children now run to me. They throw themselves on me. They tell me they love me all the time. They fight over who gets to sit next to me at dinner. That's the kind of impact we can have. And it's really just about understanding how to be intentional about this because our skills have atrophied, Buck. When I was younger, I was able to be an idiot multiple times in a row and people were stuck with me. And so I had the opportunity to learn and try new things and practice. Now, if you make a mistake, it feels like it's one and done. And you eventually find a tribe that will accept you for your odd behavior. But what we do is help people improve their batting average. And, my guide dog Drake and I wander the world trying to make it a better place. But we have so many positive stories about people engaging with us and wanting to be helpful. And the world's a much easier place because I'm able to build connection with folks fairly quickly. And I've trained my sons to do that. And their experience of the world is different than most because they have strong friend groups. They have the ability to communicate with folks well. They engage the world in a way that most people don't. And that's the skill I'm trying to help people gain. As a leader, if your people trust you, they'll go through a wall for you. They want you to be successful.
Thank you. Suppose someone says this. Um, how do you build trust from other people? It's simple. You become, you be an honest, trustworthy person, period. And then maybe explanations of what that means, but that's the one liner. And then ditch any other models. Suppose someone says that to build trust, be a trustworthy person, be an honest person, period.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a certain amount of truth to that, right? If I'm simply honest, and we can debate what trustworthy means,
Yeah, that's a thing, man. Yeah.
um, but if I'm just honest, then people will come to learn over time through repeated plays and through my reputation that I'm an honest broker. Um, that can take a lot of time, and because we interpret the world through stories, we may interpret someone's honesty as cruelty or indifference. Um, how honest should we be? And it can get muddled. And part of the challenge we're seeing right now is that people are struggling to communicate effectively. And so if I'm just honest in my own head, you may not perceive it that way.
This this is connected to how your model can be used by dishonest, untrustworthy, manipulative people, right? So, and explicitly so, and it's not your intention, right? Right.
Right.
So you're not,
My argument,
yeah,
though, Bach, would be that those people are already good at this,
right.
right? And uh, so I'm not I may be helping them because I believe that we all have the ability to build trust and we all have the ability to get better at it. So I'm still getting better at it, even though I've practiced it for 30 years and I wrote the model that I use. I'm still learning and growing and developing. Um, it's in such low supply. It's like saying people can use money for ill effects. They can, right? They can use it to promote negative factors, negative influence. They can have power and influence over us. But if they're the only ones that have it, that makes it even worse, right? And so a lot of times I focus on helping leaders get better at building trust with those they lead to lead to more positive interactions and engagements for them. And I try to help parents do a better job with their kids of creating relationships that are resilient, that thrive. And I can't forego the potential benefits that I see because of the potential downside that someone could misuse what I know.
It, I follow you, yes. Uh, it also just occurred to me that, okay, I was assuming that being trustworthy, I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to say or I'm thinking, but I was assuming that being trustworthy means being honest, or that
Right.
appropriate trust building means being honest. I think that is my view. At the same time, many people may disagree and say that that being dishonest and lying to your kids or to people can be the completely right thing to do. And according to this culture, if someone asks you, do I look fat, do I look ugly, you should not tell the truth, you should lie, and that's the right thing to do morally. And that is consistent with being trustworthy or building trust. So I'm aware that some people may say you don't have to be honest to build trust, and some people might even say you shouldn't be honest. As a maybe honesty is not good all the time. I think it is, but that I won't get into that debate. But my point is, I think that what is honesty? Is it good or bad? Is it always good or bad? I'm aware that people have different views on that, and
Right.
they may not they may not believe that being trustworthy or building trust, it strongly implies or necessarily implies being honest. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So we've seen an outbreak of dishonesty recently. It's become more pronounced, I think, and there are people who are also actively attempting to undermine trust levels. Um, and one of the challenges is You may be completely honest with me, Bach, but I may not know that for days, weeks, months, or years, right? Because I don't always have confirmation in the moment that you were honest.
Right.
And I may get different opinions because people have different perspectives. And they may all be being honest, but have different narratives about what's going on. And we see things like the attack on uh, Congress on January 6th. We see very different stories about what happened and why it happened. And I don't think that all of those people are being dishonest, even though they've got different narratives. And so there's some complexity there. You know, when I ask people, do these jeans make me look fat? And they say, Darryl, it's not the jeans. Um, it's you.
Yes.
Um, I can appreciate that. But you're right. There's complexity in that engagement as well, right? So imagine
Yeah.
you and I are sitting having dinner together and someone approaches and sees I'm about to tuck into this huge decadent dessert. And they say, wow, Darryl, you're not really going to eat that, are you? Their intent is my best interest, but it may not land that way, right? It may land as judgment or disapproval. And so honesty is part of the equation. And it's having a sense of how honest to be and how to be honest in a way that people can accept it and hear it, not just in a way that makes you feel like, yeah, I met my own needs of feeling like I was honest.
This is I'm having to close pretty soon. I wanted to first, I really enjoyed and appreciated the depth of this conversation with you. Very much. And I wanted to leave invite you to provide any last words that you wish on the topic at
Sure.
all. Yeah.
So people will often ask me, how do I start? How do I start building trust with someone? And my answer is usually, trust is the willingness to be vulnerable. You actually need to go first. You need to be a little bit vulnerable to someone else to allow them to open up to you. And it's important that we start with a small dose, share, don't scare. Um, you know, Exposing or sharing a little bit of information with someone gives them permission to share back. And in fact, a lot of times with men in particular, we struggle to ask for help. We struggle to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. The best way to get them to accept or ask for help is to ask them for help first. Um,
And by
I,
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
And by be vulnerable, you mean be willing to be harmed, be willing to put something, be willing to lose something like your comfort. Uh,
Right,
right. Okay.
right. So if I'm a leader and I am comfortable admitting that I'm not perfect, that as I was going through this journey of leadership, that I actually made mistakes when I was in different roles, and being able to tell stories about that, that's a way of making yourself vulnerable. Admitting that you need support or that you don't have all the answers.
Okay. Darryl, is there a way I can build trust without being uncomfortable? Is there a way to do it comfortably and pleasurably?
Sure, you can be uh, positive and helpful to other folks. So often it's around the benevolence piece, right? How do I try to be helpful? And
Hmm.
um, but be aware that you're asking other people to be uncomfortable. And so there's going to be a dance that occurs where they're a little bit vulnerable, you're a little bit vulnerable, they're a little bit vulnerable. Um,
What do you mean you're asking other people to be uncomfortable? Or can you give me an example?
Well, if I'm asking you to be vulnerable, it might make you uncomfortable, right?
Oh yeah, no, no. Sorry. I'm your client. I'm the CEO or the leader or the dad or the mom, and you're the trust expert, and then you're telling me to build for me to build to increase other people's trust in me. You're telling me you're advising me to be vulnerable, and that requires discomfort. And I'm asking you, but I don't want to be uncomfortable, Darryl. I want to build people's trust in me without being uncomfortable. Is that possible?
Right. You can build shallow levels of trust without ever being uncomfortable.
Okay. So I can't avoid
But,
discomfort.
well, not if you want to have deep relationships with somebody. Not if you want, and you don't want to build deep relationships with everyone, right? You want to build slightly, like you don't want your employees to be following you home at night because they can't live without you,
Yes.
right? You don't want them calling you all the time, but you do want to be able to build slightly deeper relationships with them so that they're comfortable telling you what's going on, so that they're comfortable being uncomfortable.
Okay. Um, oh, please continue with your final thoughts for the audience if you have any. Yes.
Right. So, one of the projects I'm working on right now is about helping young men learn how to build deeper relationships because there's a lot of struggles that they're going through. And the data's terrible, right? They make up 75% of the suicide rate. Their employment stats are falling. Their education levels are in decline. There's an epidemic of isolation and loneliness. And we talk about creating safe spaces, which is a place where people feel safe and comfortable, but it also stunts their growth, right? Because we can feel safe in a cocoon where we're never vulnerable, we never take risks. But we can also feel safe if we start to learn the skills to feel safe in other environments. And jugglers don't start with chainsaws. And
All right.
so we can learn skills to feel safe in a broader range of environments. And that's what the focus of my work is helping people skill build so that not only do they feel safe in a range of environments, but others feel safe around them.
Oh, I have to. Okay. I'm having to go. But this is how much I want to keep talking to you that I'm going to delay until the last minute of my next engagement. So thank you for talking to me. It's very pleasurable. Okay, Darryl, I'm a young man. I'm I'm a young man and I'm suicidal.
Right.
What should I do right now or tomorrow?
So you're already feeling overwhelmingly vulnerable. If my advice would be for the person who knows the young man who's suicidal, is to go to them and say, I'm struggling with some challenges right now. So open up by being a little bit vulnerable to them first,
Hmm.
saying, world feels like a hard place. And I'm not sure what the right coping skills are. And they're probably going to be sitting there looking at you like, what the hell are you doing? Like, I'm the one who's struggling here. I'm the one who's drowning. But you've opened the door.
And, and you've gotten their attention a little bit away from their suffering into the outer environment because the other person, and then they can kind of see their own situation in you, which is a little bit less intense, and then they can offer
Right.
that was underlying your whole advice, right? Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then start getting them to help you problem solve around how to cope with some of these things. What are some of the things that you've tried? And get them feeling like they're helping you
Hmm.
because young men really want to have a positive impact in the world. They just don't know how, and they're scared to try. And so if I went to that young man and said, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, like, how do you cope? Can you help me? Ask them for help first because they're in a place where they're so feeling so vulnerable, so raw, so exposed that asking them to be a little more vulnerable to you is feels impossible.
I want to report something in my maybe being a little bit vulnerable myself, that I appreciate what you're doing. And in my own case, I tend to be suspicious of techniquey kinds of things.
Okay.
And I realize that I'm just that in that sentence I've encompassed like all advice ever, but at the same time I'm saying it like any kind of but if you ask me, well, Bach, if you don't have a technique, what would you advise? I would just say, well, I don't. I'm going to walk away and not answer your question. But there is like a technique, even though it's I think it works and it's good. In fact, you know what? Right now, I'm going to contradict myself and I say I would advise that. Like, tell them about your own problems, and then they'll focus on you, and they'll feel better. So I may be backpedaling on my question in midstream, but the thought anyway is that I do get suspicious of techniques, even if they're well researched and they work because they're techniques, because the person is trying to come at you with a technique, and somehow
Right.
I think that's just a little bit manipulative, but maybe it's benevolently and correctly so. So that's my just a thought in the moment.
Okay.
But that's all
Yeah.
I have, I'm just sharing. But I like the technique that I mean that's good advice, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah. Uh and this has been a very raw and real conversation for me and authentic for me, from my perspective, from my feeling and internal state. Um, Anything else, Darryl, on trust, building trust, young men, safety, success?
So if people want to see the full model, they can buy the book, which is Building Trust, Exceptional Leadership in an Uncertain World. They
Yes.
can reach out to me, Daryl at trustunlimited.com if they have questions or want to have a conversation. I've really appreciated this, Bach, because you've been processing and problem solving and diagnosing in real time, and you've pushed me to answer some questions that I don't normally get asked.
Mm.
And I'm wanting to follow up and say, did I answer the objections and concerns or questions that you had in a way that made sense to you?
Oh, my answer is probably I don't know, and I don't remember all of my objections. So if you want a fast thing, yes, probably. And then I'd have to
Okay,
review, but I'll follow up with you in email if I have any, I don't remember all that we talked about, to be honest. So it's just yeah.
right.
Um but if there's an underlying if I will say this, uh you've directly a answered everything I presented to you. I will say that, and I appreciate that.
Right.
That's trust building, and that's honest, I think.
Yeah.
And I want to say my comment about being suspicious of techniques, I think I may want to withdraw that comment. It was kind of in
Sure.
and half baked, and I'm not sure what I mean by techniques exactly, and uh, what exactly counts as manipulation, what doesn't, and so just I'm petering out there. Okay,
I
for
think
go
your
ahead.
suspicion is well grounded because there's no silver bullet. And a lot of techniques suggest
Yeah.
that just do this and everything will be fine. And that's BS.
Oh yeah, there's no like mechanical algorithm. I mean, it requires like being with the other person, what's their context, what's happening in the conversation, and that requires like just paying attention and rationality and
Right.
yeah, right. Um, I'll follow up with you. I'll follow up if you have any questions. I probably will, and
Sure.
all your information, all the links that you want will be in the description. I'll get that from you. Um, Thank you, Ian, for recommending Dr. Stickel. I really valued this conversation on trust. I hope the audience does too. I know there are many business people in my audience, many therapists and coaches. Thank you, Darryl. It's been a pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you, Buck, for the opportunity.